All right, we are going to talk about some fundamentals of just basically how Bible quizzing works, how it sets up, who can quiz, some of the basic rules, all that kind of thing. So when you're just starting out, it's important to know these things, and as you get more seasoned with Bible quizzing, you'll know some of these things already, but I just wanted to make sure you had an opportunity to get some of the fundamentals and know that you have them down. So we're going to, first of all, let me just say this at the beginning. There's two different divisions, I guess you could say, for Bible quizzing, and then within each of those divisions, there's two divisions. So the Children's Ministry of the UPCI, of course, does junior Bible quizzing, and within junior Bible quizzing, there are beginners and there are junior quizzers. And the beginners are the littlest ones all the way up till age 8, and then the juniors are from age 9 through age 11. We're going to primarily talk about the senior side of quizzing today, and again, in senior quizzing, which is held under the UPCI Youth Ministries, there are two divisions within there as well. The first one is intermediate, and the second is experienced. So you can be an intermediate senior quizzer, or you can be an experienced senior quizzer, but it's still under that same umbrella of senior quizzing. So the intermediate division is intended for new quizzers who have never quizzed before, to allow them a spot to come in and learn the ropes and get acquainted with everything before going up against quizzers who have quizzed for years, okay? And this is kind of, maybe if you could think of it as like the rookie team on a baseball team or junior varsity or something like that. So basically everything is the same, it's just a little bit slower pace, and it's just a spot for people to be able to come and get acclimated, learn how it goes, and then actually move into the more experienced age. So basically, the rules state that a quizzer must either be in their first year of senior quizzing or be from the age of 12 to 14. And let me actually just say this real quick because I didn't. To be eligible for quizzing for senior side, you need to be at least 12 years old, and you can't be 19. So it's basically from the ages of 12 to 18. You need to be 12 years old by January 1st of the year that it is quizzing, and you cannot have turned 19 by that same January 1st that year. So if you turn 19 10 days later in January, you're still eligible to quiz that particular year. So you could be a brand new Bible quizzer and 19 years old in theory, based on when your birthday fell, and still quiz intermediate as long as it was your first year of eligibility. So you can either be a first year quizzer or you can be from the ages of 12 to 14. So some quizzers who have quizzed as juniors, or maybe they quiz their first year as an intermediate at age 12, and they can still quiz intermediate from 12, 13, and 14. The other difference between intermediate and experienced is that usually it's about 100 less verses in intermediate division rather than experienced. So there's a lesser amount of material that's needed on that side as well. So experienced division is for quizzers who have quizzed at least one full year of senior quizzing, or for any quizzer who just wants to quiz in the higher division. You can be any age to quiz experienced as long as you're between 12 and 18. Now, sometimes in your church, and this depends of course on your situation, you may have just one quizzer who is eligible for intermediate, and you have a couple others who are technically experienced quizzers. It's okay for an eligible intermediate quizzer to quiz experienced. They can move up to that division. There's nothing against that. It just, of course, is a higher division. So typically, you don't see experienced quizzers moving down in intermediate, but occasionally you will see the intermediates moving up, depending on your church situation. Okay, so each team can have no more than 5 quizzers on it, and I should say quiz team at the quiz board. You, of course, can have as many quizzers as you want from your church as long as they fit, the criteria. But sitting at the quiz board during a tournament, you can have no more than 5 quizzers registered on that team, and you have to have at least 2. So you cannot have just one quizzer sitting there at the board. Although there have been times when I wish that was how the rules were, because that was what the situation was at that particular moment. So you can have 2 coaches that sits back behind the quizzers. So basically one main coach who kind of helps to strategize, calls the timeouts, kind of will give the pep talk to the quizzers as needed. And then another coach who can keep score and just make sure that all of that part is running well as well too. So each team sits at the board, one team on the red and one team on the yellow, and they face the quizmaster, who is the person who sits in front of them that reads the questions. There is also typically a table of judges to the left of the quizmaster, and a table for the scorekeeper to the right of the quiz master. Now, when you're just running your practices at home, you don't necessarily have to have all that laid out exactly like that, but when you attend tournaments, that's how it's going to be laid out. Now, in each quiz, there are 20 questions that are read. Again, this is all, to clarify, this is all on the senior side. So juniors have less questions, but this is what we're mostly talking about is the senior side today. So again, there's 20 questions. The first 8 are worth 10 points apiece. 9 questions, the 9 questions that follow that, are worth 20 points. And then there are 3 questions that are worth 30 points. So basically what happens is the quizzers, each of the quizzers as they're sitting at the board, they have a little buzzer in their hand. And in order to answer the question, when they feel ready to answer it, the quizmaster will read the question. And when the quizzer feels ready to answer it, they're going to hit their buzzer. And the computer is going to acknowledge which quizzer hit the buzzer first. And it will call out their number and color. So it will say red 1. So whoever is sitting on the red side at the red 1 spot then knows that it's their turn to speak. At that point, they have 30 seconds to answer the question. Once those 30 seconds are over, the time will call on the computer, and then the quizmaster will then decide if the question is correct or not. Now, sometimes the question is answered sooner than the 30 seconds, but it cannot be any longer than 30 seconds. So if the quizzer gets the question correct, the full amount of points for that question is awarded to the quizzer. So there's an individual score that is tallied as well as a team score. So both would be raised if a quizzer gets something correct. Now, if they miss the question, however, now I know none of your quizzers are ever going to miss a question, but in the chance that they miss one, half of the point value of the question then is taken away from also their team score and the individual score as well. A quizzer can only get 8 correct questions in a quiz. That's the case, yes. And it's always a very exciting moment when somebody gets 8 correct because they just quizzed really well and they've been on that game and have been able to get more right than they got wrong. So what that's called in quiz terms is quiz out. And so if they quiz out with their 8 correct questions, they also get an additional bonus of 10 points that's added to their individual and team score. So a lot of times when a quiz is toward the end of it and they're trying to, the teams are trying to decide how many more questions do we need in order to mathematically lock the game up so that the other team cannot earn any more questions or earn any more points, they'll factor in that extra 10 points if somebody can quiz out or not. Now, on the flip side, a quizzer can only get 5 wrong in a quiz. So you can't have somebody get every single question right, and you thankfully can't have a quizzer get every single question wrong. So there are limits to both. So if a quizzer errors out, which means they got 5 wrong, unfortunately no extra points are earned. That would be nice. So interruptions in quizzing are where a quizzer hits the button or hits their buzzer in the middle of while the quizmaster is talking. So at this point, the quizmaster will press a button that they have on their board that says interruption. And at that point, the quizzer then needs to finish the question that the quizmaster was going to ask and then answer the question, still all within that same initial 30 seconds. So this may seem difficult to do, but if a quizzer knows their material and has studied the verses and recognized the uniqueness between the verses, this verse is the only one in our study that mentions this word, or there's only 3 verses that actually name this particular person by name, if a question is asked about that, it's going to be very obvious where that question is going, and therefore by interrupting the question, that quizzer gains an advantage over the other team because they get to hit in first. Okay, so this is the only time in the entire world, right, when it's appropriate to interrupt is in quizzing. So the stronger a team is, the better they know their material, the more practiced they are, the sooner they're going to interrupt on those questions. So it's very important to not get freaked out by this, specifically when you're a newer team, but my recommendation is to just learn the key words in your verses, and there's whole material topic that we will address in another video. But basically know what those unique phrases are. Make sure you know the verses word perfect. Practice interrupting. There's a logical example a logical spot rather of when you would want to hit a question. So here's an example, okay? So I know I can't see you, but why don't you hit the table or do something when you know the logical question that I'm going to ask here. And then I want you to finish it and answer it. So here's the question. According to the famous poem, Hickory Dickory Dock, where, that's probably where you would hit, right? So that's where you would interrupt. And then the question that you would ask or think that I was probably going to ask is, where did the mouse run? And then we all know that the answer is, of course, ran up the clock. So obviously we're not studying nursery rhymes. That might be too easy. But anyway, the point is by knowing the material and the answer that's wanted, a quizzer can interrupt the quizmaster and hit in faster than the other team. So the advantage to this, of course, is you get in faster than the other team, but it does have a disadvantage as well at times. And I'll tell you that here in a minute. So when an interrupted question is correct, and they've given the correct answer, all within those 30 seconds and finished the question, a quizzer still gains the full point value of that particular question. And then the next question is read. However, if it is incorrect, that quizzer and team lose half the point value of the question, just like it is when it's not interrupted. And then the same question is read again to the opposite team for a chance to answer. Only the other team can answer at that point, and they are not allowed to interrupt the question when it is called a reread question. So that is the risk of interrupting, because sometimes you may miss it. And let's say, for example, with a 30-point question, if it's reread and missed, this is then a 45-point swing in points on just one question. So team red has minus 15 because they missed it on the interruption. It's reread to team yellow. They get it correct, and then they've added 30 points. So it's a 45-point swing in just one question. However, this risk is one that must be taken in order to be competitive with more experienced teams. And part of the art of quizzing is interrupting, and so that's definitely something to practice and to study and to work on as a quizzer, and specifically coaches with your quizzers. Sometimes you kind of have to force them to do this, but in order to be competitive, it's something that's important. Okay, so in each game, each team has 2 timeouts that are 60 seconds apiece. And these are times that the quizzers and coaches can take a break and talk and discuss the strategy of the game, as well as what the next steps should be. So in all other times, except during these timeouts, the quizzers are not allowed to speak to each other or to their coaches or anybody else. They can't talk to anybody in the audience or any of that sort of thing, because if they do, they'll get a foul, which is called conferring. And basically, it's a minus 5 points to the team and the quizzer. So usually during a timeout, a coach can check with the main scorekeeper to ensure that they have the same score that's been going along. And this is important because sometimes you could accidentally miss something, and then you try to strategize in a way that's actually not accurate because you have either less or more points than what you thought you did. So it's important to check with the scorekeeper. Both teams can talk and take the break when a timeout is called, no matter which team called the timeout, which is helpful. Now, coaches have the option of calling what's called a point of order. And basically what this is it kind of contests the procedural ruling or some sort of procedural situation in that. So the point of order must be called when the question is over and before a new question has started. And this basically can bring different situations to the notice of the quizmaster. Like, for example, if they missed a question, or the speakers are too low and the quizzers can't hear what the quizmaster is saying, or somebody got out with a correct but they haven't left the quiz yet, or things like that. So the point of orders are not used to contest the judgment or ruling of a question. So if the quizmaster said that is incorrect, the coach can't call a point of order to say, I disagree, okay? There's another way to sort of contest that piece, and we'll talk about that here in a moment. But the nice part is that the coach does have a way of saying, hey, by the way, whatever the situation is. Now, a quizzer does have the option of contesting the ruling of a question, however, which is nice because the quizzers have really studied the material, and sometimes they know that there was a mistake in the question as it was read, or maybe somebody else didn't give the correct answer. And so what they can do is once the question is over and the quiz master has said either it's correct or incorrect, the quizzer can stand up and fully say, contest. The quiz master then allows a 60-second time period to discuss the contest. Now, only 2 quizzers can speak at a time, and no matter what, the captain, who is at seat number 1, must speak with the quizzer who contested. At that point, only 1 quizzer can then go back and speak with the coach. The coach has to stand up. Only 2 people can be talking at one point. Now, once those 60 seconds are up, the coach can either bring the contest forward to the panel of judges, or they can say withdrawn. Withdrawn just means that the contest is not valid enough to bring it forward, and we aren't going to basically bother the judges with this at this time. However, if the contest is brought forward, the judges can then discuss and determine the point that was brought forward to see if it will change the ruling of the question. If the contest is agreed upon by the judges and the quiz masters, and they change the ruling of it, it's then going to be called a granted contest. And if you get a granted contest, that's pretty cool. Then the quiz master will say whatever the next steps will happen with that particular question. So if it was granted and say the quizzer really didn't actually quote it correctly, then instead of having ruled that the question was correct, the quiz master may come back and say, actually question number 17 is going to be marked as incorrect instead. So if they also then feel, however, that the contest that was brought down wasn't accurate, or the quizzer really did quote it correctly, or the information that was presented really didn't make a good enough case to change the ruling of the question, the quiz master will say that the contest is denied. Now, each team can have 2 withdrawn contests as well as 2 denied contests. You can have as many granted, however, as you want. Some teams use contests as a way just to have the coach talk to the quizzer directly, and that's perfectly fine, and some strategies involved there. Sometimes your quizzer just needs a break and they just need to be able to talk with you for a moment. That's why they have a limit to how many withdrawns that are available there as well. Now, occasionally, a game will be tied after question number 20. And if this happens, 3 additional 20-point questions are read to the teams to then determine a winner. If it's still tied after question 23, they'll read 3 more. Most tournaments are set up in a double elimination format. That means each team has to lose twice before they are out of the tournament. Other types are round robin style, which is more of a practice type tournament, but allows each team to quiz all of the other teams a few different times, regardless of the win-loss history. And it just gives them a great, chance to practice. All right, so just generally as a new team, I just recommend to not be afraid to ask questions. Watch the quizzes that are happening before or after your assigned quiz time. Sit at the judges table and listen. Watch the questions as they're being read and as the quiz master rules on them. Learn and glean from all of those who have been involved for many, many years. So this is just a pretty much general overview of some of the basic things of just kind of how the game is played, how it's laid out, all of that sort of thing. So I hope that this has been helpful for you today.